the agenda. We have one request from, wait a minute. Let me see if,
I would say it's not on the agenda. I would say it's not on the agenda, so.
yeah, that's what I think. So it's not on the agenda, so Kim McDonald. And I see when your hair gets wet that it becomes curly, huh?
Needless to say, Bender Rosenthal came back, reappraised my house. And finally, when they were standing out in front of my house, the appraiser and the acquisition agent, I found out the story of why the house had lost the almost 2,000 square feet. And I would like to let you know what kind of company that you're dealing with. Evidently, the appraiser had heard from the real estate people, because this has been so long ago. My mother, who had Alzheimer's, was living with me at the time, and I'd taken apart a few walls because of the plumbing. I wanted to adjust things for her living conditions, and I had to see where steel I-beams were, where drains could go. And then I got the news, so I did not close anything up till I found out what was going on with my house. So this information was made available to the appraiser, and he got other information from the county, so that he counted my entire downstairs as unimproved basement. Now, my downstairs is not below grade level, and it is finished except for the few holes that were in the walls. He did not contact me to let me know why the square feet was being deducted, and he also did not tell his acquisition specialist, because when I asked him specifically when he was at my house, where did the square footage go, he couldn't tell me, and his answer was, that was the appraiser, I don't know what he did. I called back Bender and Rosenthal, tried to talk to the appraiser, did not know that by law, once he passes the papers on to the acquisition specialist, he may no longer talk to me. And this was not conveyed to me by the company. I continued to call, got no courtesy response as to where the square footage had gone until they showed up on my doorstep that day to reappraise. Going inside, I did get a fair appraiser. Maybe this time they will be getting back to me. But I also had asked the acquisition specialist not to come, because I'd had such a bad experience with him not being able to give me any information while we were sitting down discussing my appraisal the first time. And the appraiser needed help and saw fit to bring this person as his helper that day, even though I specifically asked, and the acquisition person had told him that he had been asked not to come. And this is the kind of treatment I've been getting by this company the whole time. I really wish next time you would research your company that you are going to have your liaison to us a little bit better.
Thank you, Kim. Okay. I need an approval for the November the 13th minutes.
Move approval.
Second?
Been moved and seconded, minutes be approved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Review of our monthly year-to-date revenue and expenses.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This cash flow report is for October 2014. The agency's starting position for the month was $2.5 million. There were several sources of revenue for the month. We received a $200,000 reimbursement from the state for work on the RFMP. We received $295,000 reimbursement from the state for their cost share for work on the GRR. And we also booked $538,000 in unsecured zero land value flood assessments. Expenditures for the month were primarily in the Southport project at $153,000 and the RFMP at $66,000. In Fund 257, we received a large payment from the state of $5.9 million, and that was for work and adjustments, true-up adjustments for work in the previous quarters. And Fund 870's position at the end of the month was $3.3 million, and with the money that's parked in the state fund until we transfer it over to 870, that brings our total cash position for the month of October to $10.1 million. And that's the end of the report.
Are we getting good cooperation from the state and as far as,
At this time, we're getting excellent cooperation from the state as far as the true-up payment process goes. The project manager, Mike Musto, has been really diligent in pushing the evaluation of the invoices and the process and moving it through his chain of approvals too at the state. We've been really happy with Mike's work. I think it shows too. We've gotten regular payments now.
No questions?
No, no questions.
well, we have no other questions, so we will I make a motion that we accept the revenue and expenses monthly report.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Consent agenda.
I'll make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
I'd second it.
Been moved and seconded that we accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The regular agenda, presentation of potential new money bonding capacity for West Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency.
Good morning. When we were at your meeting last month, we presented a proposal for refinancing the 2008 WSAFCA bonds and described to you the savings that we could achieve by refinancing at today's lower interest rates. Today, this item deals with the addition of what we call a new money component. That means an issue that would be part of that refinancing that would have new project funds or construction funds added into the bond issue. And so as we look at your next major project, the Southport project, we know that we're going to have to issue some level of WSAFCA bond. We have other funding sources, of course, that include the city's Measure V sales tax. We have the flood and lieu fees that could contribute to your construction costs. But the issuance of the bond is the real important, it's the major element of that financing of the local share of the project. So what we did is we convened our finance team, primarily Piper Jaffray, who's the bond underwriter, prepared a number of analyses for us. And of course, in your staff report, you can see the one that we're presenting to you is scenario 2A. So whenever you see that, you know there was probably a scenario 2B, 2C, and so on, and multiple scenarios. So what I want to do is just kind of focus in on the scenario that we evaluated that would maximize the construction funds or project funds to you. So there were a number of scenarios that obviously provided less funding and changed a number of the terms of the issue. So I'll just say that in this scenario, what we were able to generate was $31 million in project funds, and that would assume a closing in February of 2015. But there are some changes in assumptions that I just point out to you. So for instance, we looked at the maximum term of the bond. Now, the previous two bond issues you did in 2008 and 2011, they had 30-year terms. but there's quite an appetite by investors for municipal debt, as we call it, out in the marketplace. And a 35-year term is actually something that the underwriter believes would be well received by investors. So we looked at a longer term. And then we also made some assumptions about interest rates. So again, the previous analysis we presented to you on the refinancing was based on interest rates in November. So last month's interest rates, and everybody anticipates that there's going to be some rate increases. There'll be rate creep by the time we would go to the marketplace in February. So we were very conservative, I think, in terms of assuming that interest rates would be approximately 50 basis points higher, or a half a percentage point. And what does that mean in terms of proceeds? Well, for the scenario you don't see here, where we were at a 35-year term and we assumed the low rates in November, it means about $3 million worth of construction proceeds. So that goes to show you, if rates go up a half a percentage point, you get $3 million less, everything else the same. So again, we are concerned about interest rates, but in this scenario, we did want to capture the rate increase that no crystal ball here, but we know that rates are starting to go up. So in terms of kind of the basis for this maximum capacity, we're really just bonding against the assessments that are on the tax roll, that are on the county tax roll. And so you also have kind of governmental properties that we hand bill separately, but the way the two previous bonds were set up, that isn't considered. So the security for the bonds that are issued is basically just what goes on the county tax roll, the private assessments. And so we need to maintain a level of coverage that's at that has the revenue coming in from those county tax roll assessments have to be at 110% of the debt service, of the combined debt service. So there's always going to be an overage there that will be there for pay-as-you-go expenses. It's a minor amount, but I just wanted to point that out to you. So as we move forward, right now, it looks like, based on cash flow models that we've been looking at, and your next agenda item that Mr. Fabian's going to present will go more into that, but we know that with this level of capacity, if you get small or insignificant amounts of money, let's say from Measure V, that you'd be able to cash flow the Southport project based on your WSAFCA bonding capacity. So that's very good news. Now, there'll be decisions made about Measure V that are forthcoming. The City Council is going to be talking about this item on December 17th, and there's another kind of analysis that's going on with the same finance team looking at, well, how much can we bond if we bonded the Measure V sales tax? What are the competing needs of the city's capital projects? And again, we won't get into that today, but the good news is that you have adequate capacity to undertake the next project with a bond issuance. Interest rates are still very low. You're gonna capture the benefit of that refinancing still, and that will be capitalized into, instead of savings, it'll be new money. So that's pretty much all I have to present. I could respond to any questions you have.
Just got a quick one. The difference between a 30-year term and 35-year term, is there any rate differences, or is it just a matter of extending out the term to get a smaller payment?
It's pretty much a change in just the term. But to answer your questions, there is a slight change in interest rates, because the interest rates for those final 5 years are going to be much higher. So they will change your overall interest rate if you look at the average over all the years, just because you're adding those outside 5 years, it'll have a higher percentage.
And so how do we pay off the bonds? It's just with the property tax dollars that come in through the property tax rolls?
That's correct.
And the length of this term on the bond is going to be 35 years, you say?
Yeah, so 2050. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, that's a suggestion. When we come back in either January or most likely February, with the actual authorization to issue the bonds, it sounds like if you're okay with a 35-year term, that's the direction the finance team will go.
Greg, do we have a rough idea of what our total cost is going to be downstream from here?
Well, we have a pretty good idea of what our total cost is going to be to support the Southport project. A project beyond Southport remains to be seen, remains to be defined. But we have a range that we are going to consider, and I'll go over that a little bit in the next item. But what I would like to say relevant to this item number 6 is, as Paul mentioned, there's an item going before the council on the 17th that will discuss Measure V and the uses of the Measure V funds. That will also be further discussed in January, probably be an item at the council retreat. And what we get out of that, that discussion should be what we might expect to see, or what we would expect to see from a Measure V allocation. That will play directly into what we bring back to the board, to this board in January, more likely February, to recommend for the amount of new money to finance to support our current needs for the Southport project. So we anticipate total local need of about $30 million to get us through Southport. So depending on how much Measure V and in lieu fee we're able to dedicate to the flood program will determine how much we come to you for and recommend that we bond against the assessment. And then, of course, with a capacity of about 30 million, worst case scenario is no Measure V, no in lieu fee, and we use all of the remaining bonding capacity to fund the Southport project. The flip side, we get a generous allocation from Measure V and a generous allocation from the in lieu fee, and we bond, say, $15 million to get us through the Southport project with remaining capacity for a future project.
Explain that to me again about the in lieu fee. I mean, it's a function of whether there's projects that generate it, right?
Correct. There is.
It's not no one's looking at redirecting in lieu fees, flood fees, are they? Or
In lieu fee is a city collected fee, so the city would have to allocate that to the flood program. So
that I thought, years ago when we had our assessment vote, there was two components, or was an in lieu fee was that vote at that time strictly on the assessments, and the in lieu was a separate component that the city council put in place.
the in lieu fee, I believe, was a separate component that the city put in place, but it was part of the overall financial plan to fund the projects for the levee improvements. So you're
Okay.
correct that our levee improvements were to be funded from a combination of local funds, from a combination of assessment and the in lieu fee. In lieu fee has not performed well with the recession. As you know, it's a function of, so, but it is turning around, and there is some revenue being generated. And so we're talking to city staff, finance, and ultimately the city council on what would be appropriate to dedicate to the flood program to support these projects.
Well, please keep us informed of any discussions on that in lieu fee by our brethrens over at the city.
Will do.
So what's going to have to happen then is there's going to have to be a very firm commitment as far as Measure B is concerned from the city council on flood, and the other one will probably be light rail or streetcar.
Yes.
And do we know how much money Measure B generates?
Well, that was what Paul was talking about. They're doing an analysis as we speak as to what the capacity is for, just as the analysis that he brought forward today on what the WSAFCA assessment can, its capacity. There's a similar analysis being done for Measure V. I'll let Paul talk about that one.
Yeah, what we're assuming, and again, it'll be presented to the city council next week, is that we're kind of taking the current revenues, annual revenues from Measure V, and we're assuming a 1.8% escalation or increase every year. And so, yeah, in that report, there'll be a discussion of what we anticipate revenues will be, and again, various bonding capacity scenarios.
Well, so are we using a fluctuating figure as far as bond capacity? I mean, I have some concerns with that if that's the case, because I mean, I can't see into the crystal ball and see exactly what Measure B is going to be bringing in each year. I mean, I realize that there are some years that are up and down, up and down, up and down, and mostly they've been up. I mean, we've been very, very fortunate. But I just don't want to put a bond out there and have some kind of commitment behind that bond that is flexible or something, you know? I mean, I have some issues with that.
Yeah, Mr. Kristoff, there was no assumption about a fluctuation in the revenues, but the same kind of issue about bond sizing and the timing of the bonding in order to meet the cash flows of the projects that would be funded from the proceeds, that's really what the analysis is about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Can you just refamiliarize us with what exactly Measure V was and is? It was a advisory vote, right? Or
Well, there are two measures, so back in 2008. So Measure V is actually the one that increases the sales tax
okay.
for the capital portion by a quarter cent, and then it was extended for, it expired, and then it was extended by the voters for 20 years. So it goes from 2013 to 2033. And so that capital portion of sales tax coming in is what we're talking about. And Measure U, of course, is the measure that was an advisory measure
Okay.
that says, you know, these funds, we advise that these funds should be spent on streetcar and flood control improvements. But because of the nature of the type of vote that occurred, you can't say that the funds will be definitely spent on this or that or the other. It has to be just an advisory. And those are all just legal issues related to the voting and Prop 218.
okay.
So can you extrapolate out by next week? Can you extrapolate out how much money will go to flood and how much money will go to streetcar?
There will be a discussion and extrapolation about how the options would work in terms of sharing between the two, and that will be discussed as part of the report.
And
Unfortunately, I can't present any of that at the moment because I'm just not authorized to at this time because the
No, I
report
understand.
hasn't been final.
Trust me, I understand. That'd be
Yeah.
a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, and I don't believe that any recommendation other than to continue to look into to get direction from the council to further explore how to divvy up Measure V, if you will. There's not going to be any action taken or proposed on the 17th for the actual distribution of Measure V.
But if we go out for this bond in 2015, that discussion has to take place.
Correct.
I would
So
imagine.
before we come back to this board with a recommendation on the amount in term to fund Southport and potentially other projects.
Right.
We would need to know what the allocation of Measure V and the in lieu fee is going to be for the flood program. So those are the two components that, once we know, then we'll bring this back to the board with a recommendation.
And so when we go out for this bond, we can go 8-1, 5-1, what is it, 7-1 now, or 10-1?
Yeah, we have complete flexibility in how we go out with the bond in terms of the amount. You just to recall, we did a $10 million bond already and a $13.3 million bond. And I think in the report that you're going to see, it references the project funds that were expended. So the bond amount is always greater than the actual money you receive, so.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
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 But I want to make sure I'm clear on this, because it's kind of going around in circles. What we're proposing here, as far as a refinance plus the addition of new money, that bond is going to be solely paid for by our assessments. The issue of whether we get, how much Measure U or V money we get is a function of deciding how big a bond we go for. Is that correct?
Well,
As far
I
as
look
our
at it
budgeting.
the other way around. I think decisions that are made about Measure V and how much the city council decides to bond of those revenues and how those funds are allocated will likely be what determines the size of your bond.
Size of our
Yeah.
bond, right. Okay.
Thank you.
This is a shared process with the state. These monies will be spent with a share coming from the state back from us.
Well, the money that we generate through the bonds is part of the local share
Yeah.
for our projects. We're only funding the local share, the state funds their share.
Well, we need a motion to direct staff to proceed with a new money issue
I think that was was that just a presentation, or are we supposed to be?
on, is that just a presentation on item 6? Or do you need?
If I could, Chairperson Denton, the direction that you've provided as part of this discussion is sufficient for us. You don't need to take a vote.
Okay.
Okay. So this will be on item 6.
Chairman Denton, if you feel more comfortable with the board adopting a motion directing staff to proceed as they have suggested,
Yes, I would.
then go ahead and do that.
So I need a motion here to direct the staff to proceed with the preparation of the documents necessary to do it. Okay?
I'll make that motion to proceed based on the presentation that was made today.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, now. The consideration of recommendation to advance future flood risk reduction projects in preparation, in partnership, I should say, with the state of California.
Chairman Denton, members of the board, this item before you is really to discuss, we spent a lot of time with the board discussing our past project and certainly our current project, the Southport project, and this one is now before you to sort of set the stage for what may we do after Southport. And so I want to present some information to the board and hopefully to gain support from the board to consider advancing discussions with the state on what a future project would look like after Southport. So as the board is aware, since 2006, we've been advancing the West Sacramento Levee Improvement Program, the WSLIP, to provide 200-year level of flood protection and to complete urgently needed projects in the city of West Sacramento. We've completed 3 projects thus far, I Street, Rivers, and CHP, under the early implementation program in partnership with the state. And we're currently in our 4th early project, again, partnering with the state, the Southport Levee Improvement Project. As was presented to the board, there is a substantial capacity, financial capacity that the WSAFCA finances currently has, and again, depending on allocations of other money, Measure V and the in lieu fee, there could be a significant amount of funds available to support an additional project post-Southport. And so that really is the impetus for bringing this item before the board and having this discussion. A series of screening and selection processes have been used in the past to select the previous sites based on technical memorandums that were provided or developed by the WSAFCA management team, including WSAFCA staff and other program management staff and consultants. Back in, I think, 2007, a set of criteria was used to select early implementation projects in the north area, as the ones I've mentioned. And then in 2010, we revised our prioritization and selection criteria to provide some weighting factors based on lessons learned during those other early implementation projects, and that fed into the selection of the Southport Reach as our next project, the one we're currently doing. A review of that analysis that was used to select and prioritize the Southport project, it was reviewed and deemed to still be appropriate and relevant for use today and looking for screening and prioritization for a future project. So the table as presented in the analysis certainly confirms, I should say the table that's presented in the report certainly confirms that the Southport Reach has a high ranking, a #1 ranking. A Sacramento Bypass ranked #2. That obviously that project has been completed, and the Sacramento North levee also ranked #2, is very much in alignment with the projects that we've completed, but there's still a lot of other work that needs to be done along the north reach of the Sacramento River. So that is still a relevant area to consider for a future project. And then ranked #3 is the Yellow Bypass Reach. So both of these are, if you will, sort of the top candidates for consideration for areas to look at for a future project. Some of the considerations, in addition to this ranking and screening criteria that we've performed, some other considerations are its compatibility with the risk analysis that was performed by the Army Corps of Engineers as part of the GRR. And as is outlined in the report, our analysis and that risk analysis performed by the Corps staff is in very close alignment. So there's good support, if you will, from the federal side for these two levee reaches. In terms of cost-sharing opportunities, as board is aware, our previous north area projects were able to achieve a 90% cost share under the EIP guidelines. So any project, now as we move towards UFR, the guidelines are not quite the same. We may not be able to achieve quite 90% state cost share in the north area, but it should be close. Maybe on the order of 85% cost share. So a north area project would allow us to maximize state dollars for a future project. And again, as outlined in the GRR, our problems that are identified in for our levee reaches is in very close alignment with the problems identified as part of the GRR. So again, a future project that we would look at either on the North Sacramento, the Sacramento River North Levee Reach or the Yellow Bypass Reach would be, has a good potential for full credit under the 221 provision. And then also, I think a consideration relative to FEMA and potential future mapping is we would like to size a future project that would get us at or above 50% of completed construction for the West Sacramento area to feed into a future favorable mapping designations should FEMA decide to remap us. So these are some of the additional considerations that went into the recommendations herein. Talked about the financial analysis both in the previous discussion and just a little bit here. In order to support our current project, the Southport project, we essentially need about $30 million of local financing. Now, depending on how much is allocated for Measure V and the in lieu fee will dictate what is available to go towards a future project. I think I've outlined here, depending on how that allocation goes, and we do anticipate to get some allocation for Measure V and the in lieu fee, that a future project may range somewhere, total project cost, between $50 and $150 million. And that's essentially sized based on our ability to cost share in those projects. So what we're asking today really is not to get approval of go design a future project on the Sacramento River North Levee or the Yolo Bypass Levee, but rather authorize us to continue to perform some analyses and work with the state on what that future project may look like. We would definitely return to the board at a later date once we feel that we have more certainty, both from a financial aspect as well as project delivery aspect on what we would recommend the board to undertake as the next future project. And that essentially completes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
In your report, you made a comment which kind of startled me, and I, at the time, and that is, you said that one of the projects we received full credit for?
So credit is always a tricky subject to talk about because although we have established an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with the Corps for the 221 credit of the Southport project, credit is, the actual amount of credit is not evaluated until sometime in the future when the Corps is embarking on a Corps-led project. So it's not until that time that they sit down with us and the state and say, and go through the analysis of, excuse me, previously approved and or completed projects under the MOU provides this much credit, this much, dollars that would then go towards our share of that future project. So I think the point I was trying to make with this staff report is because we're in alignment with the GRR, these projects should be fully eligible for 221 credit in the future.
No, I think it was a very thorough explanation of what you're asking
Bill?
to do. Is this amount going to be enough to complete the process?
The amount that we're asking you to
Yes.
authorize? That's enough to get us started, and depending on, there's a number of factors. Certainly, we don't want to get in the way of what we're trying to accomplish with the state for our Southport project funding agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that to work around, but we do have some additional analysis to do on the reaches for confirming problem identification and what the potential improvements would be, so that we can look at preliminary costs of those improvements to help us size a project. So I think for the amounts that we've asked for here, it should be sufficient for the near term.
So you're trying to get enough analysis done to then be able to sit down with the state and get them to concur, and then at some point come back with a possible project, huh?
Yeah, and part of that discussion with the state is how much money do they have available
Right.
to partner with us? So we have to
Right.
have that discussion as well.
The state does not participate financially in this part of the process?
Depending on what we do, we have always made the argument that some of these preliminary costs should be eligible for cost share, and
At
we
some
have been
point,
successful
okay.
in many cases for some of our other early implementation projects, and we would continue to push that effort.
Okay.
So I can't say what portions would be at this time.
Very good.
So what we need is a motion here for item number 7 to follow the recommended action staff has presented to us, which is consideration and recommendation to advance future flood risk reduction projects in partnership with the state of California and the expenditure of about $250,000. I just need a motion for this.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve item number 7 of the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Project updates.
I'll try and be brief on the project updates and just cover the relevant, what I feel are the relevant sections. For the Southport project, on the permitting and the environmental documents, the combined biological opinions that are with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and National Marine Fisheries are ongoing. They are on schedule for issue of the final BOs in January is when we expect them. BOs will be both for the Southport project as well as the GRR. Once they're complete, then those BOs will be combined with the final draft EIS and sent off to San Francisco Division for review, and then release of the final EIS for public review as part of the Corps' NEPA process. For the interim village parkway plans and specifications, we have initiated the permitting process for that independent package. We anticipate submitting the 404, the 401, the 1602 permits applications at the end of this month, and we expect to finish up the relevant portions of the programmatic agreement with SHPO as well by the end of the month. And those will go to support separate construction package for the village parkway improvements, hopefully next year. In support of the 408 permitting package with the Corps for the Southport project, staff and the management team has scheduled a meeting with the Corps for middle of January. Our 408 package is based on our 65% design milestone, and as the board is aware, we are advancing towards 90%, so there have been some design refinements. And so the purpose of the meeting with the Corps is to inform them of those design refinements and also to respond to the comments that we had received based on the 65% design, hopefully to keep this on track, gather understanding, and keep that 408 process moving forward. For the real estate services in support of the Southport, there are 8 property negotiations currently underway. There are 5 appraisals that are being updated with more recent comparable sales information. A couple of them were heard by the board today. There'll be more that will come returning to the board over the next couple of months. Under utility relocation in support of Southport, letters were recently sent, or actually will be sent at the end of this week, to the utilities, AT&T, PG&E, as well as Crown Castle, informing them of our revised project schedule and the needs for those utilities to relocate their services prior to our construction of the project. And I think that's it under the Southport project. For the general reevaluation report, we're still on schedule for all of the milestones. The next milestone coming up is the agency decision milestone, which is scheduled for late January of 2015. There is a call being scheduled with headquarters, what's called as a vertical call, being scheduled for next week. And that call will be, attended will be WSAFCA representatives, myself, Holland and Knight, perhaps a representative from Matsui's office, as well as district, division, and headquarters staff. And the primary purpose of that is to stress the importance of our milestones next year for the GRR, and the ultimate approval with the chief's report. And just to make sure that everybody's aware of the schedule and what roles everybody plays in helping to get our that study approved. Also, with the general reevaluation report, we've received a draft cost share agreement amendment from the Corps. The amount of the amendment total is $770,000. 1/4 of that would be the responsibility of WSAFCA. That amounts to just about $193,000. So I would anticipate coming back to the board in January with a recommendation or with that cost share agreement amendment.
Nothing's being held up in the meantime, right?
Nothing's being held up in the meantime. They have sufficient funds to continue to move forward. I think on public relations, as you may have seen in your packets, Crocker and Crocker drafted WSAFCA winter newsletter, which includes updated information on current projects, flood insurance, the Plan, Pack, and Protect California flood preparedness outreach that was conducted. There's also a spotlight on Ken Rusich, the former WSAFCA general manager and RD 900 manager in the newsletter. I think you guys received drafts. I have copies of the actual final document to be mailed out that I can distribute to you following the meeting, so you can take the final copy with you. And those will go out, they're being prepared now for mailing. They'll go out, I think it's a 6-week billing cycle, so they'll go out in December and January. Last month, we completed our pre-wet season coordination meeting with representatives from the state, Yolo County Office of Emergency Services, West Sacramento Fire, West Sacramento PD, flood staff, Public Works. I think we even had West Sacramento Unified School District in attendance this time. But we shared contact information, we reviewed slow rise flood plan, we shared inventories of materials, which because of the drought have not changed since last year. So that was an easy update. And then we also discussed a little bit about the flood emergency response plan that's currently under development under the state grant. And I should have more information over the coming months on the development of that emergency response plan, the mapping effort that goes along with that, and I'll update the board later as we have more information on that.
Greg, on that type of information, was under the public relations thing with Crocker and Crocker, you think we could get something out explaining just basically what you said, that there are supplies being have been accumulated to take care of any type of flooding or disaster, whatever it is, and the direction that we're going with it?
Yeah, I think we can do that. Typically, that information is put out by the city, Public Works, sometimes in cooperation with Fire and PD. Something to that effect, not specifically with those items you mentioned, just went out yesterday in advance of this coming storm. That talks about supplies, sandbags, and other things, availability, what city crews and RD 900 and PD, Fire, Public Works are doing. It doesn't necessarily talk about what we do, overall for emergency preparedness, but it's very specific to what's going on right now. But I think we can help get that message out.
I think it would be good if we got into it. And I have one other question. Are we running into, on this, the cross levee? Are we going to have any problems with that downstream here now? Is everything's kind of leveled out to where we're going to be able to get the Corps to agree that that's part of our project?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The Corps does agree that the levee should be part of our project. It is included in the GRR. And parallel to that, or in parallel to that, we are working with Corps District to bring it into the PL 8499 program, have it recognized as a federal levy. And that process has been outlined, and we're advancing to the end with the Corps. They had previously issued a no levies in, no levies out directive. I don't believe that directive has changed as of yet, but once that directive is changed, we'll be ready to bring the levy in.
Very good. Okay. Takes care of informational items and everything. Do you
I
have
have one question on the Sac Bank setback levy project. Are there any odds out on whether the road will open in January or not?
I don't know if odds are out, and I neglected to update you on that, but they're like 95%, 90% done with the degrade of the remnant levee. They have a few more thousand cubic yards to move as soon as weather permits. Then there's basically punch list items, including a little bit of roadway and some fencing and some other things. So they anticipate having the road opened in January.
Okay.
Project completed end of December, road opened in January. And that was as of a meeting with the Corps on Tuesday.
See what the report says in February.
Point well taken.
All right, other than that, meeting's adjourned. Jim Day would explain the closed session.
Well, the board did meet in closed session to confer with its real property negotiator, and no action was taken.
So now we need an agenda approval. Thank you, Jim. Need agenda approval.
I'll make a motion to approve agenda.
It's been moved and seconded the agenda be approved. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Public comment